Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. I'm your boy Abram, joined as usual by Tucker Hazel, and for the first time on the channel, a very, very special guest, John Cartwright.
Hi, that's me.
And we're here today to talk about something as special as John, which is a little N64 game that more people should play, and that's Sin and Punishment. But before we do, John, we gotta take a minute and do the YouTube thing. If you want to join our Discord, link top of the description right down there. Subscribe, like the video, ring the bell, do all of it. None of it doesn't matter because we're here to talk to you about Sin and Punishment.
Sure.
So we're just going to kind of start by going around, sharing our thoughts, experiences with the game. And John, you're the guest, so why don't you start?
Sure. So I had a friend growing up who was really into the more obscure Nintendo games, and he had an N64, a Japanese one, with Sin and Punishment, and I had never heard of this game before. So I was super jealous of him. I didn't know what he was talking about most of the time. But then it came to Wii Virtual Console. I think it was like 200 Wii points more than the usual N64 game. So that's
Because of
like,
import,
yeah, I think it's just the
maybe.
Japanese version they put up
Sure.
on the Wii
Yeah.
shop channel. So I ended up buying that just because I heard so much about this game. But I still, even though I heard about it, I didn't really know what it was though. So I kind of went in a bit blind. And I was blown away because I was a big fan of Star Fox 64, and I didn't really know of many other rail shooters on the N64. But this one it just took the carnage of that game and amplified it to the extreme. So
Yep.
yeah, I had a great time just playing on the Wii for the first time.
My
so-
childhood friend who's into obscure Nintendo games is this gentleman right here, our other direction. And he told me about this. He's a very big Star Fox 64 fan, as I'm sure he's going to allude to relatively soon. And he made me play both of these games in preparation for this video. I beat Sin and Punishment approximately 3 hours ago, and I had a very good time with it. I've never played a lot of N64 games. I own an N64, haven't played a ton on it. But playing this game and playing a Japanese game that wasn't released in the West, there's like a bunch of different weird things about it. It was a super unique experience for me. And honestly, after I remapped the controls on my Wii U, I had a great time with it. The original controls on the Wii U don't work that well. If you're getting it on the Wii U Virtual Console, I highly suggest remapping your buttons, swapping the two sticks, giving yourself a different shoot button. But once you really get into the gameplay loop, this game is insane for an N64 game. I have no idea how it works.
Yeah, so Sin and Punishment Star Successor, which is the sequel to this game, did come out in America. And I read a lot about that in Nintendo Power when I was a kid. And my aunt had a copy of it, so I had played it a little bit and forgotten about the game. And then after that, I started playing Star Fox 64, and now I've played Star Fox 64 literally countless times. It's my favorite game of all time. Absolutely love it. So I don't know where I crossed paths with the game again, but I ended up buying it on Wii Virtual Console. Played it, loved it, kind of put it down a little bit, but then started playing some more regional exclusives, writing about them over at CBR, seeing actually, John, some of your videos on the topic, got me thinking about Sin and Punishment again, booted it back up, played it a couple more times, and I now need to maybe grapple with the fact that I've got a new favorite game of all time. I'm not really ready to do that yet.
Wow.
Because Sin and Punishment is phenomenal.
That's a lot of stress. It's a lot of existential crises that you'll have to go through.
Right. And I don't want to have to deal with that right now. Certainly not on camera. That's something to do in private. But the point is, I really love Sin and Punishment. I think it is an incredible achievement, technically, artistically, on the N64. I think that from a gameplay perspective, it's really great. I'm not sure what the story's about. They really want you to know. It's got a very involved story. Tucker and I did a little bit of research after the fact into the plot, and there's this whole like famine and making the ruffians as this food source and a revolt in politics and military interventionism and stuff. And you start the game and everyone's just kind of talking at each other, and it's impressive because it's on N64, but it doesn't really mean anything. So as a complete package, I don't know. I really love the gameplay though, and gameplay is what matters to me.
It's weird too because it never came out officially in English, but the voice acting is English. But it has Japanese subtitles, but it was never intended to be localized.
And that's something interesting. As I was playing the game and watching those early cutscenes, I watched the full intro video that comes up before that start screen, and it's all in English, as you said, with Japanese subtitles. But sometimes the audio mixing isn't great, so their voices are kind of buried under the clangs and bangs and explosions of the world around them. And I was thinking, oh man, if this just had English subtitles, it wouldn't be a problem. Unfortunately, they chose to do English voice acting, but with Japanese subtitles, so that it sits in a weird place where I'm not sure exactly who the intended audience was. Of course, Japanese audience, the American audience would have a hard time hearing it. It's very strange. It's a very interesting game from that perspective.
For me, the story really only bothered me my first couple playthroughs because as soon as you start skipping the cutscenes, you come to value the story in the sense that it opens up such incredible level design opportunities. The set pieces you're going through are so dynamic, and that's really why I care about the story, insofar as it takes you to this insane exterior, helicarrier fight, and now we're going interiors and all these bosses and everything. That's great. How we got there, it doesn't really matter eventually, because I think this, more than Star Fox 64, as we'll probably get into a little bit, is way more about score chasing. This really is a gameplay experience that happens to have a really involved narrative. Kind of reminds me of Ninja Gaiden in some respects. But for me, I kind of just forget about the story at a certain point.
Mm-hmm. John, how do you feel about the story? Is that something you're involved in with your enjoyment of this game?
I'll be honest, it goes into the background with me. This game just plays phenomenally. I find Star Fox 64 is just kind of this continuous on rails shift from beginning to end. Whereas this it stops a lot more. There's a lot more chunks, which kind of makes it more impressive because it's not always trying to get you to new scenery. It can push way more out of the N64. So the action can just go way over the top at times, and it delivers a graphical fidelity which you just don't see on this system.
Yeah, and especially with some of the later set pieces that in some ways remind you of like a Bayonetta, the Umbral Clock Tower falling. It's like camera shifting everywhere. It's really hard to tell what's going on sometimes, and there's missiles coming at you and bullets and all sorts of stuff. But it's kind of insane that this actually, and of course a late N64 game, but it's insane that it works on the hardware, and I think it has quite a bit of slowdown if you play it on the cartridge, but on the virtual console it runs phenomenally. And I was just going through this like, wow. Of course it ages in some ways. The textures are not great in a lot of respects, but the fact that they have fully animated models and mouths and cutscenes and all this, it's pretty wild. And I'm looking at this thinking, okay, these are the N64 games I've played, Mario 64, Smash, and Star Fox. They're a lot less involved. And when you see this, it's just leagues above. And it's like, okay, this could have come out as a PS1 game or a PC game or something like that. And it still works on the N64, which is crazy.
You touched on the controls earlier, Tucker, on the
Yeah.
Wii U version. I'd say that they're a little bit weird in all the versions because the analog stick is what you use to aim. And then I think you use the C buttons to move around. Or I think you can use the D-pad as well if you want to. But it feels a little bit clunky, but you do get used to it. But I find Star Successor is just so fluid because you have the Wii remote to point around and the nunchuck to move. And that's so natural.
Sure.
Yeah, the controls, when you rebind them, you can play a little bit easier. Like I was moving with the D-pad, aiming with the right stick.
Yeah.
Tucker, I think you found something where they were talking about, we wanted to use I love a good prop. A good prop here. You use both sides of your N64 controller. So, it's interesting, and the cartridge is kind of expensive. I would like to track it down at some point, but seeing how it plays on that hardware in that respect would be good.
Oh, prop comedy right there. There he goes.
Look at that. There we
Always
go.
got it nearby.
So the other main control thing we ran into, and Tucker brought this up, and I don't know if I noticed it then after Tucker told me about it, but holding down the button continuously is a strange decision. It almost feels like this game should have a toggle and then a separate melee button or something.
Yeah.
They're back to Ninja Gaiden, because I always like to bring everything in my life back to Ninja Gaiden. It definitely, Sin and Punishment feels like a game that is really ahead of where a lot of its contemporaries are, but through a modern lens, you can appreciate that, but still see a lot of those cracks. And I do think the controls from a lot of different respects are one of those flaws. It would be nice to get this re-released somewhere, that is tailored for a more modern control scheme, or really just any new Sin and Punishment game in general would be great. But the controls are definitely a sticking point.
Yeah. With Star Successor, I don't think you can do them any better. Like if that were to come to the Switch, you'd have like gyro drift after a while.
Yeah.
The Wii remote was just so perfect for that kind of style. It's just so quick and just effortless.
Sure. Yeah. One thing that I certainly, as Aiden alluded to, the holding down the button. I played this coming right off the heels of Star Fox 64, which I beat 2 days ago. So you can see how my timeline was working here. But I was so used to continually pressing the button or holding it for the charge shot, that holding the trigger that I was using for fire, instant punishment, it was like, okay, well, this isn't as engaging. Like if I'm just holding it down, and at the time I was using the lock-on feature, so it really was just, okay, it's gonna do its thing and I'll be dodging around a little bit. But I do think that, as we found out, the game doesn't quite teach you that if you don't use lock-on, your bullets do more damage. So it's actually really designed for you to not use lock-on, especially in some later boss battles. But that makes the game much more engaging. But from what I learned from the tutorial, I thought you were supposed to use lock-on. And the other one was, okay, high-skilled players or something. This is my first time going through. I'm going to use lock-on. But I had a lot better time with the game once I rebound my controls to make sense to me, but B, used the manual aiming, because it just was so much more engaging, and I felt like I was able to control jumping around and doing flips and all sorts of stuff, and it's a really engaging experience in that way.
It's a game with a very high skill ceiling and not a lot explained, which I think is both to its benefit and its detriment. It was fun for me, for example, to discover that normal mode is way harder than easy mode, but also fairly different in terms of boss attacks, in terms of some elements of the level design and such. And then there are the mechanics that aren't particularly well explained. So I feel like even having played it several times, there's a lot for me to discover still, whereas hop back into Star Fox 64 and I know, okay, I'm gonna hit here, I'm gonna go there. I mean, this is my route. I got my route planned out. I know how to line up my combos and everything. So from that personal perspective, I really enjoy how much there is to discover here. Of course, you don't have the routes. It's very fixed. It's so score based. It's about, let's get that hit combo up and everything, which is great. And I think that's why this sort of mechanical depth and some of these more hidden mechanics might work in its favor to add more for players like Tucker, who aren't necessarily just about score chasing, who don't want to sit down like me and just play it over and over and over again. So there's a lot to discover, which I like.
It's one of those games that's just so fun to master. Like I think if Sin and Punishment came out today, a lot of people would say, oh, it's an hour long, it's 2 hours long, it's garbage. But it's just so fun to replay again and again and find all the secrets and just try and do something new each time. Because each playthrough does feel pretty different. Because you can always just mix things up and play in different styles and find new ways to take things down. And it's just so fun to keep coming back.
One thing that we've actually been talking about recently is the amount of content that and padding that modern games have. And Abram brings this up all the time. We talked about with new Pokemon Snap how they use a lot of techniques to get you to replay levels and keep trying things, but still have that longer form story. I think that our play times for that game clocked in at about around 10 hours, which is significantly longer than Sin and Punishment. But I do think that this having such a short runtime and giving the ability to skip the cutscenes and, as you were saying, play in multiple ways, it does seem like something, even as someone who's not huge into replaying games, I don't really like going for high scores very much, but this is something I could see myself retrying just for the skill level. Okay, I know how these work, and of course I started the game using auto aim and crappy controls, so if I know how to play the game better, I'll give it another try, and I could see myself coming back to this again just because it is so short, and I think it really works to its favor in that way.
Yeah, so to John's point about mastery over game mechanics and Tucker's point about the replayability, I am a radical believer in short games. I really thought New Pokemon Snap should have been like 2 or 3 hours long, like the original, which never would have flown, but would have for me. So I think part of what's so attractive about Sin and Punishment is not necessarily, oh, where's a new set piece? Where's a new level? Where's a new route? It's, oh, this just feels so good to play that I can jump back into it again and again. And okay, maybe I'm not going to throw my gamepad because I died here and lost my combo. I'm going to throw my gamepad 10 minutes from now and get to the point where I never have to throw the gamepad because I finally got mastery over every single stage, which is really compelling. And at the price point of the game on Wii U as for Virtual Console, I think more people would probably be willing to try that and not feel like, okay, I just spent $60 for 2 hours of replayability, which takes you, for me, really far, but some players not as far, So through a lot of different lenses, I think that on Virtual Console, it's probably a great way to experience this game that more people need to check out.
And there's no downtime either. There's no part of this game I'll take out. It all just feels, it flows so well. Whereas even contemporaries like Star Fox Zero, for instance, I enjoy that game to an extent, but there's you're getting a copy out.
Prop comedy, there you go.
Gotta have it close.
But there's certain levels, like the gyrocopter level, which isn't so much about Star Fox gameplay. It's about just kind of slowly navigating with this drone, and it feels so divided from the rest of the game. Whereas Sin and Punishment has nothing like that. It's just relentlessly good from beginning to end.
Yeah, and I think what is really cool about this, and something that I might have had a little bit of an issue with Star Fox 64, is just the visual variety of it. I mean, of course, you're going to different planets in Star Fox 64, but essentially every section of every stage in this game is a new location, is new layouts of enemies coming to it, plenty of different kinds of enemy variety, and just the fact that sometimes you're inside, sometimes you're outside, you're doing all sorts of different things, and the fact that they are able to give you such a wide variety of set pieces, action sequences. Sometimes I think there's a few levels that are just like side scrolling, which it feels a little bit weird because none of the other levels are, but the fact is they mix it up and it never feels samey in the way that maybe I felt occasionally with Star Fox 64, just flying through space. But I think this definitely has that over Star Fox 64. Of course, I just played both of the games, so I'm trying to decide which one I actually prefer and balance their pros and cons. But this one has a lot of the production value and variety is a huge bump to it. I mean, it works for a modern lens, and I never played this game before, and I was playing. Okay, this is something that I would see a modern game doing, jumping from sequence to sequence and never staying in the same place.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people love Kid Icarus Uprising, myself included. But a big sticking point against it is the divisiveness of the on-ground sections. And Sin and Punishment is basically just the flight sections exclusively. So if you love that, then like this is perfect for you.
Yeah.
Two great games with challenging controls, by the way. Keep trying to play Kid Icarus Uprising. I played probably 6 times. I can't get too far into it because of those controls. But one thing I want to note about the spectacle, the production value, and everything is that the game doesn't care that it has such incredible visuals and enemy design, because you can just tear right through all of it. And that's something I really respect. What I think makes the game so playable is that, okay, here are these vistas, here are these enemies, here are these really complex elements being presented to the player. Just shoot them. Just tear right through them and keep moving.
Yeah.
And that creates such an excellent replayable experience, because you're going to miss detail. You're going to miss all these things that Treasure just lets you walk through, which is, it's rare, I think, to find a game that puts so much attention to detail, but lets you keep moving through. It reminds me of modern things like Hitman and Breath of the Wild in terms of we're going to make this excellent world for you, but how you experience it is up to player agency and gameplay and mechanical drive and all of that. So that really compels me personally.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not something we usually see in shooters like this. I mean, we don't really get games like this anymore. If a developer's made something that's so high quality, they want you to see it. But I love that they can just let you just plow right through it if you want to.
Yeah, and it honestly, in some ways, reminds me of certain sections in some games. You know, you'll get a level in a Sonic game, or you'll get something where you're moving so fast and everything's just blurring by. Like, okay, if you stop and look, they put a lot of effort into this, and there's all sorts of background detail. But that's the entirety of this game, and especially for an older game and the shorter runtime, the fact that it was developed back then and is running on this hardware, and that's the entire game, makes it feel a lot more complete and in my eyes special compared to a lot of games from that era, which you look at the environments and they're not very complex, and they're okay, we're learning how to place polygons in a 3D environment for you to interact with. But of course, this not a lot of interaction with in terms of environments, but in the background there's all sorts of things going on, and it's really cool to look at.
I think the big question, to sort of pivot towards Sin and Punishment on the whole in terms of Nintendo's catalog and stuff, is, do we feel that there's a place for Sin and Punishment still? Because I want there to be, but I'm not sure that there is.
I hope so. Is there a place for Star Fox anymore? I mean, that's kind of the question. Do gamers want these shorter replayable experiences? And I'd wager most of them probably don't. I feel like there's so much quality here, but it's so hard to sell. How do you sell a 2-hour experience anymore? I mean, I don't know. I'd hope there to be. I feel like the Switch is a great platform for this kind of thing. Like having a mix of analog and gyro is brilliant for aiming.
Yeah.
And I feel like the production could be crazy. I just don't know if there's a place for it anymore, though.
Yeah, I mean, we see games like the remake of Panzer Dragoon, which was released on, I think, most modern consoles. I have no idea how well that did in terms of sales. I never heard anyone talk about it, to be honest. But you have these older games that are being remade. Clearly, there's a nostalgia for them. But through the eyes of even someone like myself who had never played either of these games or any game in this style before, the replayability is something that I don't personally connect to. But having that short, really content dense experience is interesting. So I think that if Nintendo expands a little more into their sort of smaller scale titles. Not everything is $60. Not everything's a physical release. Get some stuff out on the eShop, allow themselves to have a little better leeway in terms of a game length and stuff. They could release a Sin and Punishment 3 on the eShop and have it be 4 or 5 hours long, pad it out, give it a little more runtime to appease the modern eyes. But I really do think there is a place for that, just not in the $60 full budget. Hey, this is like what we're ending an E3 on type of thing. It's just because of the gameplay style and the shorter length.
Yeah, it's a shame too, because I would adore this to happen again. And if I was just speaking from my own personal preferences, absolutely make another one. But I just know, like, going from past experiences, this probably isn't something that would sell well in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, speaking personally, I would throw Pokemon Diamond and Pearl remakes into a volcano for a Sin and Punishment game, but that's my personal taste, and I have to remove my personal taste from a question like this because I feel like there's evidence for and against right now. I think that the House of the Dead remake, which got announced out of nowhere and is apparently coming to Switch this year or next or something, gives me a little bit of hope that there might be room to explore pricing scales and genre and get back to light guns and arcade style on rails shooters again, possibly. So I almost think there's space for let's bring Sin and Punishment Star Successor back, give it more traditional controls. But you look at something like new Pokemon Snap, which has been developed in this context of 2021, not as a let's re-earth, House of the Dead, let's bring back solar properties. If we're looking about today's design philosophy, the padding in that, even the on-foot sections in Kid Icarus, which give it so much more runtime, that's where these genres are moving. And I don't know if the gameplay experience is as pure and as compelling in that way. I feel like you add in these more systems, you add in these other elements, and you start to lose what Sin and Punishment is, which is a to the bone 90-minute experience that you come back to every couple months or whatever. So I don't know if there's space for that. I'd like there to be, but we'll see.
Yeah. And I do think that the fact is that this is so bare bones. I do think that it could retain the charm and the quality, even if it did have a few upgrade systems or a small hub world or, maybe side quests, smaller missions, stuff like that, things that are reminiscent of modern games on top of that gameplay format. I think that could still be something really interesting that would appease both you who are looking back so wistfully and wish that games were 3 hours long with no side content. But I do think that it could have stuff added on top. And I was honestly thinking about this with new Pokemon Snap, which does padding, I think, in the wrong way in some sequences. By the way, John, neither of us were over the moon about new Pokemon Snap. We enjoyed it in some places, but I think the padding really got to us.
Sure.
In our review, maybe card in the corner. But I do think that this could be something where it could be evolved. And I haven't played Star Successor, and obviously that released significantly later. I mean, maybe, John, you could speak to how it was modernized for the franchise, but I do think a current modern day Sin and Punishment game with some extra side quest mechanic stuff could have a place in the market.
Star Successor really wasn't that modernized, to be honest. I mean, they had the control scheme, the Wii Remote control scheme in there, but there was online leaderboards, which I think was like the main motivator to keep playing. But it wasn't ultra stretched out though. Like it wasn't that divided from the first one.
Sure.
They got lucky though, because I mean, there was a House of the Dead light gun game on there. There's all kinds of stuff. Like that was the perfect moment to bring Sin and Punishment back, which is so exciting. And I wish I could have. I mean, I was 9 at the time, so I wasn't going to be like, "Oh, it's time for Sin and Punishment," But so in this current moment, I don't know. I hope it's all about crossing fingers, as we tend to do. But I cross my fingers every night for a new Metroid game, and Metroidvanias are all over the place. So I feel like if we're gonna dig up Sin and Punishment, when light gun games are on the way out, it's a tougher sell.
So what we're saying is Sin and Punishment E3 guaranteed.
100%. Yeah.
100%.
Absolutely.
We've been discussing about how exciting this E3 is likely going to be just from the bare bones of what could be announced. Just adding that one extra thing is maybe, just maybe, even that much more exciting. But I think what we've sort of come down to and how we wanted to frame this discussion is this worth playing? Is it worth going back to the Wii or Wii U, or no, not Wii, but only Wii U virtual console and picking it up? And I would say yes, as someone who just played it, who had never played a game like this before, $12 is a pretty solid sell for the content that you're getting. Of course, Abram would have spent $60 on it. And John, I'm sure you spent much more on your cartridge. But I think that it's worth going back, giving a look and noticing how high quality and how modern for the time it was. And I think the problem is just the fact that these games don't come out anymore because they've kind of been lost to time, and the consoles and the ways that games content-wise have evolved. It just kind of left that in the dust. But if people go back, $12, pick this up on the Wii U Virtual Console, give it a play, give it a couple plays, there'll be more fans out there. So if you're watching this, if you're from our content, from John's content, go buy the game. Just give it a try. And I think both of you would concur on me with that one.
For sure, yeah. Especially judging it by the N64's library. I mean, it's not a bad library, but it's not very diverse. Like Star Fox is kind of the only game of its kind on that platform. And then in Japan, there was this crazy on-rails hyped up version of it, which no one really got a chance to play in the West. So yeah, absolutely. I think this is one of the best N64 games. And if you haven't played it before, go ahead and do it now. I mean, it's still available in the eShop. It's just waiting to be played.
Mm-hmm.
If the answer to a question can be buy a Wii U, the answer is yes. So go buy a Wii U so you can play Sin and Punishment, and then have access to all kinds of other great games. But in the context of this by itself, I think for the modern eye, for the modern taste, I think that this is the right price point. This is the most accessible control scheme you're going to find for a lot of different reasons and perspectives. If you want to play Sin and Punishment, you should. This is the way to do it.
One final thing. If we get N64 online, do you guys think this is a part of that collection? Because considering the Japanese exclusives and older games they've been digging up for SNES and NES online, I think it's possible.
It's a no-brainer for me. I mean, there's still some Famicom games which aren't on the service, like Murasame Castle isn't on there. There's a few games like that, but they put on Panel de Pon on the European and American one, so if they can do that, I'm sure they can do Sin and Punishment.
I'm sure they can too. And that N64 library, for as much as I love it, to your point, John, it is smaller, it is less diverse. So if you got to find titles, this is a great one to put on there. So fingers crossed again. We're just doing a lot of finger crossing because it's Sin and Punishment. What more can you do? Can't say, oh, I can't wait for the next one, you know? So let's just get this one back in some form or another. Any last thoughts from anyone on Sin and Punishment?
I've spun my spiel.
Everyone should play it. That's my final thought. Everyone.
And that's
tell
a good
your
place to leave
sister,
it.
tell your mum, tell your dog, get them all playing Sin and Punishment.
I'll go tell my dad, hey, you should do some Sin and Punishment. And he'll be like, what the hell are you talking about? That sounds really violent and vile. But I will be telling my friends who might care about this that they should pick it up. Not many of my friends have Wii U's though. So I'll have to scrounge for those people and then scrounge for the ones who might care about this.
Well, there we have it. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us in this trip back to 2000 with Sin and Punishment. Go play the game. John said it best. Go play the game. But so thanks for watching again. Subscribe, like, you know what to do. You've seen a video before. And thank you very much, John, for coming on. We were both huge fans of your work since Game Explained on Nintendo Life. So it's really cool getting to talk to you about this title.
Well, thank you. It's a great chance to talk about it.
Tucker?
I guess we just ended there. I'm not sure. I thought we were ending. Oh, Christ. Okay. Well, that was a perfect way to end it.
How are you guys?
You're
Doing
okay.
great.
How are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, not doing bad.
I'm glad to hear that. Would be terrible coming into their video. You know, having a crappy day and
doing awful.
not ready for this.
No.
Come in angry already.